Alright, everybody, hold on to your horses. Hold on to your big boy pants. Diaper up. I'm kidding. You're listening to We Don't Watch Movies with me,
Woo!
Corinne.
And me, Monze.
Yes, I forgot my name. Because I was looking at you, Corinne, and immediately I was like, hey. Uh, I'm Monze and you're Corinne. I've had a rough day today at work. It's been a real long day.
I feel that.
um,
I'm only cognizant because I took like a 2-hour nap before this, so.
my cat and I have been alone for a week now, almost a week, and I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure he's done with me. I'm not good enough for him, and that cuts real deep. You know what I'm saying?
Sorry.
My cat is giving me deep emotional trauma that I didn't realize I was gonna have. Okay, but yes. Do you want to redo the thing, or we'll just keep going? Okay,
We'll just keep it. I think it's funny.
Okay. um, so this week I'm talking about the movie Midnight from 1939. We had talked about a movie that I wanted to talk about and you wanted to sort of watch / read about, and I was like, don't, and then I forgot what it was. And I've been really busy and stressed and tired, so I didn't get to check it out. So I rewatched this movie a couple days, less than a week ago. I really like this movie, and I'm like, I know Corinne has definitely never seen this movie.
I definitely never have.
Okay. Corinne, I know you have no idea what this movie is about. But what do you think this movie's about? Based off of the title.
Midnight, and it's 1939. I keep thinking of Midnight Express, but imagining the theme song from On Golden Pond. So we're doing great.
I don't know what any of that means, so we're doing real great.
Midnight. I think the movie is either about something that's going to happen at midnight,
okay,
or it is about something that only happens at midnight.
Ooh, what only happens at midnight? The witches come out.
The witches come out. So I think. All right, let me come up with. I keep thinking Midnight Express, so I'm just gonna say there's a train. So I'm gonna describe the plot of a movie that's probably not even related.
Okay. I mean, there is a train in this movie, so.
Okay, great. Okay, so then I think someone, a guy or a woman, there's a guy and a woman. They're taking the same train. They're like total opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the woman is like a down on her luck, desperate, like person who's just like had the worst day, whatever, and she's like on this train to like get away from her woes or something like that. And then the guy is like on the run, or he's like on a regular business trip, but it's like a hunky dory kind of like business trip sort of thing. So they're both on the same train. They don't know each other. They're both on the same train, like sitting opposite each other. And the train is a late train. It's a red line. So they're like doing an overnight train from, I don't know, like New York to Chicago or something like that. And then at midnight something happens. So the whole train ride is just them kind of getting to know each other, and then like their needs are conflicting with the other person's needs, which is where the conflict comes in. And then maybe they arrive at midnight. I don't know. At midnight they fall in love. So, but then it's also the climax of the movie, because what are they supposed to do? They can't be together, but then somehow they either find a way to be together, or it's like a dramatic no, we can't. Which I don't know. Maybe that could happen in a 1939 movie, but that's my guess. Something about a train. There's a man and a woman. There's a romance plot, but then conflict because they can't really be together. But then they either do end up, or they're like, oh, we just had this amazing whatever moment at midnight that has changed our lives forever, and then we move forward as changed people, or are we changed, or whatever. So that's my guess.
Okay. All right. So I'm not gonna lie, I stopped listening. But I'm sure it was not correct at all.
Okay, great.
Because the title isn't a good title, and it doesn't really tell you anything about the movie.
It really doesn't.
It doesn't.
I've got nothing to work on.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. Yeah.
I think I'll do better after I see this trailer.
Okay. Yeah, so let's just watch the trailer now.
Right.
I sent it to you.
Okay, I have it.
And let me know when you've started.
I'm starting it now.
Okay.
Cinderella goes to Paris. What?
You remember Cinderella, don't you?
Is this Cinderella?
You remember the Cinderella story? At midnight.
Oh. Oh my god.
They're really milking the Cinderella.
I know. Scandalous. In the 30s?
You're gonna sleep in my place. You'll get an idea too.
I think I'm a little ahead of you, but I like that read.
Yeah, you are. Streamlined Cinderella. I love Don Amici in this movie. He's so cute. Ugh.
Who's the actress?
Claudette Colbert.
Oh. I thought that was the name of the character.
No, that's the name of the actress.
Oh.
They're really milking her in the Cinderella ties.
Yeah.
At midnight. They said the name. She's the actress that was in It Happened One Night.
Okay.
So they're just like, look at this really successful movie she was in.
Mm-hmm.
She's also in this movie.
God.
And funnily enough, I don't think anyone really remembers this movie. I just kind of found this movie one day in the library.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me check this out. Because I would, check out, a bunch of classic films from the library.
Yeah.
Like a nerd. So, is my... There we go. So what do you think this movie is about, Corinne?
All right,
now that you've seen the trailer.
I will say that when I do hear the word midnight, Cinderella popped into my mind.
That's the first thought you have is Cinderella. Okay, so...
But I didn't pursue it, because it was just like a background,
you were like,
Cinderella
that's too easy.
I didn't even it just popped up, but not even as this maybe it's this. It was just like a word association.
Yeah.
Thing. When I'm like, maybe something happens at midnight. I'm like in Cinderella, how something happens at midnight. So clearly it's a kind of a Cinderella retelling, but in the late 30s. She gets stranded in Paris.
Okay, that's literally straight from
the
narrator's mouth.
I guess the movie starts at midnight and then continues on, so it's after she's at the ball kind of thing. Even though the original Cinderella story, it finishes with her marrying the guy, so I'm I don't know what they mean by it's picking up after it left off, but whatever. I guess at midnight.
I don't know what that means.
I know. I'm I don't know. So I guess it looks like a love triangle situation. There's two suitors. She's got a lovely old gay man as her fairy godfather.
He's not gay. He's just an alcoholic.
He's coming off queer-coded just from the trailer.
Just from the trailer?
Yeah, the flamboyant, helpful gay friend.
He's European. He's not gay, he's European.
Europeans are queer-coded.
You heard it here first, folks.
Here first. The kissing, all the... Anyways. So he's, trying to set her up with one or two of these men. One of them, at least. He doesn't care which one. So,
he doesn't care which one.
He's casting a wide net. He's
he has no stakes in this race.
He doesn't. He's just here to help her. So then she's trying to get back home, but she also needs to figure out her situation in Paris. So from the trailer, it looks like she's about to spend the night with some guy. Maybe, he said, you're going to spend the night with me, but then she, cartwheels out of that situation and ends up spending...
cartwheels out of the situation. Let me get out of this car. Woo!
And then,
get out of here.
And then,
he was
ends
in
up...
such shock. He was like, oh.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
and maybe she like ends up spending the night with the other guy. I think it's just like a rom-com filled with hijinks, and she either ends up with, obviously, either she's going to end up with one of them, which is very obvious, or she will marry both of them, which would be very funny, or she would marry neither of them, which would still be fine. So
there is this movie, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, where I'm pretty sure the movie ends as a throuple. I haven't seen it, but it's like from this time period.
Yeah.
From the 30s. It's got Gary Cooper in it, I think. I need to look it up, but like it's like a whole like sex comedy or whatever. And I think she's with one guy, then she's with the other guy, and I think at the end of the movie they're like, well, why don't we just all be together? Basically, I think.
Yeah.
I need to find that movie.
Yeah.
Because I do want to see it. That's not spoilers. That's not this movie.
Is this movie before the Hays Code or during the Hays Code?
No, this would be after.
After the Hays.
After like the Hays Code is still, because the Hays Code didn't come until like 1931, 3, somewhere around there. Once like talkies came about is when the Hays Code also came, because a lot of movies in like the 20s, I don't know if you noticed, some of them can be a little like quote unquote like salacious or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird like the things they could get away with, and actually the Hays Code kind of, I wouldn't say helped, but it did make movies really interesting, because writers, and like directors would all try to find different ways to get away with things, which is, which made for clever writing, clever directing, clever like filmmaking, all that stuff.
You're gonna have a lot of interesting like dialogue via
and like a lot of innuendo
like
and all this stuff, and but yeah, I have to relook up the Hays Code. But yes, okay. So you're much closer this time.
I wonder why.
But at least you had something to go off of.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you ready for the?
Yes, I'm very interested in hearing what this movie's about.
Okay, all right. So like the movie opens like it's like a rainy night in Paris, and like the security guard guy, like the engineer, is like looking through all the train cars, and he finds like Claudia Colbert, who plays Eve Peabody. She's like just sitting in a train car by herself, sleeping, and he wakes her up. He's like, "Hey, you got to get out of here. This is the last stop." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And she's like, "And this is Paris, and it's raining." She's like, "Great." And she had just come from Monte Carlo. She doesn't have anything with her, just like the dress she's wearing, which is that fancy dress you saw her in. And like a, what was it, like 1 franc? Like, she doesn't have any money on her or anything.
Yeah.
And she just came from Monte Carlo, where she literally spent all her money.
I was gonna say, she gambled all her money.
Yeah. So she has like no money and no place to stay, and she's like walking along the train station, and all these taxi drivers are like, taxi, do you want to ride? And she's like, no. And then Don Amici, who plays Tibor Cherney, we'll just call him Cherney. He like sees her, and he's like, well, she's like a hot lady, right? So he's like, hey, I'll give you a ride. And she's like, look, I don't have any money. This is all I have. Right? It's like 1 franc. And he's like, oh, yeah. I don't want to give you a ride. And she's like, look. I'll make you a deal. You drive me around looking for a job, right? And when I get my job, I'll pay you double the fare. And he's like, so I get to drive you around to find a job. And she's like, yeah. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, okay, I guess not. But she's like, but, it's dumb because I need a taxi to find a job, but I can't get a job if I don't have a taxi, and I don't have any money. So she, like, starts walking off. She, like, buys a newspaper to use as, like, an umbrella because she doesn't have anything. And he sees her, and he's like, oh, she's so sad. So he, like, chases her down. And by chases her down, I mean, like, he drives, like, half a block. And he's like, just get in the taxi, whatever. So he starts driving her around, looking for all these jobs at these nightclubs. And she's, like, looking through the newspaper for, like, all the, want ads for singers. And she's, like, a showgirl, like a nightclub singer or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he, like, takes her all these places, and all these places reject her, and she's all depressed. And he's like, where to next? And she's like, I I forgot, like 40 francs or whatever. I don't know how much money. It's like 40 whatever dollars. We're gonna Americanize this shit. Like, that's too much, you know, just take me back to the train station. He's like, what are you gonna do at the train station? She's like, I'm gonna go sleep there, whatever. And so he's like, well, like, that doesn't sound good to me. So he's like, but he's gonna buy her dinner. So they go to like this place where like all the taxi drivers hang out, like a taxi driver bar, basically like a restaurant. And they're talking, and she talks about how she's really into money, right? Like, she really wants to be like successful, quote unquote, with money, right? Like, all the showgirls would end up with you know, all these rich men, and she just end up with like the jazz player, like the, you know, the pianist or the saxophonist, the
starving artist,
yeah, whatever, right? Like, and she's not into that. And she's like, I almost had one once. And he was like, what happened? She was like, well, we were together, and then his mother came to me and offered me a whole bunch of money to break off with him. And he was like, and you didn't take it, right? She's like, no, I did. That's why. And then I went to Monte Carlo.
Oh my God,
I bet everything, and she lost all of it.
Oh my God.
And he's just like, oh my God, this woman's crazy, right? And he's like, you've got a terrible sense of like...
Your judgment is awful.
Yeah. And so anyway, they're like dancing or whatever, and all these men start dancing with her, and he like gets upset, so he goes outside, and this other guy comes in, he's like, taxi, and all the taxi drivers run out, and then the place is empty. She's like, what happened? He's like, they're beating up that guy who asked for a taxi, and they're like, why? He's like, because I paid him to say it, but he doesn't need one. So they get back into like the taxi, and she's like, this isn't the way to the train station. He's like, no, you're gonna sleep at my place tonight. And she's like, I'm not gonna sleep at your place tonight. He's like, no, it is, it's fine, I'll just finish the night shift, you stay there, and in the morning you can just leave, right? And she's like, no, I'm not gonna do it, because I know I'm just gonna stay and wait for you to come home and to thank you, and then one night will become 2 nights, and 2 nights will become, you know, like marriage or whatever. And he's like, well, what's wrong with that? And she, you know, she's like, well, because being poor isn't what I want to be, right? He's like, you don't know that. Like, I make enough money to, like, get by. Like, it's good for me. Like, why isn't it good for you? She's like, because my parents were miserable, and it didn't matter if they loved each other. Like, they were just upset because there was never any money. So he's like, well, he needs gas. So he, like, stops to get gas, and while he's getting gas, she, like, jumps out of the car and, like, runs away. Because she doesn't want to end up in this unfortunately full of love marriage but no money, poor life.
This bitch is the one with no money, and he's paying for her. What does she mean? I want a rich husband. No, I don't want to stay with you because you don't have money, when she's the one with no money, and he's paying for her. This bitch just wants, like, designer bags or something.
Yeah, she does want designer bags. So,
oh my God,
she knows what she wants, and she's gonna get it.
She's a girl boss.
She's a girl boss, the original girl boss. So as she's like trying to get like out of the rain because it's still raining, she sees like all these like rich people like in their fancy outfits. They're heading to like some place, and she's like, well, I'm in a fancy outfit. And so she like gets in line to go to this thing, and everyone's like, ticket, you know, where's your admission card? And she's like, I don't have anything, but she has a pawn ticket for her suitcase. And so she like goes in there and she just like hands it over, and they don't look at it, they're just like, it's good enough to just have it, right?
Yeah.
So she like goes in, and it's like a concert, like a black tie classical concert, whatever.
Yeah.
So she's in there, and like some lady is doing some opera or whatever. She finds a seat, and she starts taking off like her shoes like quietly, you know, because and the guy, what's his name, played by guy? Yeah, John Barrymore, George, I think his name is, he like sees her, and he's like, this lady doesn't belong here, right? Like, he knows, because he's rich, he knows everyone that comes to these things. To him she obviously stands out.
Yeah.
And so he's like watching her, and then this other guy, I don't even know his name. Oh, Marcel. Notices her. But during like this concert, like this other guy comes up to start like doing like a piano piece. And someone's like, "Isn't Eve Peabody here?" Someone got in here with the name Eve Peabody, and no one says anything, and Eve is looking around like, I wonder who could possibly be. Like, I don't know who could have gotten into this concert without an admission ticket, right? And that like intrigues George even more. And she's like, well, now's my time to leave. She like puts her shoes back on. She's trying to like sneak out, and this guy Marcel, who was the actual queer character, in this there's always like the queer best friend.
Yeah.
Even in the 1930s, they had that, but it was.
Well, that's what I was saying. So he's the younger guy. Not
the younger guy, okay. Not the one who like kisses her hand in the trailer, but the other one, like the thinner one.
Okay.
He's like, oh, I noticed you as soon as you came in, and she was like, oh, why? He's like, don't worry about it. So he like leads her away, and she thinks like, this is it. They found out who I am. Mm-hmm. And she actually is sent in to be the fourth in a bridge game. Don't know how to play bridge, but apparently you need a fourth.
Yeah.
And while she's there, she meets what's her name, Helen, and Jack Picot. And Helen is actually the wife of George, the guy that was noticing her.
Yeah.
And Jack Picot is just like, he's a rich ladies guy, right? Like he is like wooing everyone, and he and Helen are having an affair. Okay, like it's so obvious. And so they're like, oh, what's
swinging?
Yeah, and so when they introduce themselves, they're like, oh, what's your name? She's like, oh, it's Cherny or whatever. So she uses the taxi driver's name.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like remember everything. And Jacques is like super interested in her all of a sudden. He's like dropped Helen like whatever, and Helen is super jealous. So they're playing this game. They're playing bridge, and George comes in, and he's like, hey, that's the woman from before.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out, like, she left her purse on the table. He's like looking through it. There's like nothing in there. And they're like just chatting. And when she gave the name Cherny, someone else was like, oh, you must be the wife of Baron Cherny or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And even George is like, oh, so you're the wife of Baron Cherny, how's the subway coming along? And she's like, oh, there's still, rubble or whatever. He's like, okay. And the game ends, and they're like down. Like Eve had lost like 10,000, like 4,000 francs or something. She's like, oh no, I don't have any money, right? She's like, oh, what am I going to do? And George is like, oh, here's your purse. She opens it, and there's like 10,000 francs in her purse, and she's like, oh, I guess I forgot I went to the bank or whatever. She's like, what's going on? So she's able to pay the amount.
Yeah.
And then Jacques is like, oh, I'll take you home. Like, I'll take you home. Where are you staying? And she's like, guess. And he's like, the Ritz. She's like, you're right. So he like drives her to the Ritz. And she's like freaking out. She's like, I don't even know what's going on. And she's like, okay, goodbye. Right? Like she's gonna like walk away. And he's like, no, my mother always told me to escort a woman and like to her door or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they get to the lobby. She's like, oh, you can go now. He's like, no, they said to your door. And she's like, no, it's fine. And he like goes to the desk and asks for the key to Baroness Cherny or whatever. And she's like, oh, I'm gonna get found out. But instead of like, oh, Baroness Cherny, yes, here's the key. And she's like, what's going on? He like takes her all the way up to the room, and like she unlocks the door. And she's like, bye. And he's like, no nightcap. She's like, no, my mother taught me some stuff too. So like, go away. So he like leaves. And she, like, goes in there, and she's, like, super freaked out. And she thinks it's someone else's room. And she catches her, like, reflection in the mirror, and she, like, freaks out, and she realizes it's herself. And she's like, this is a big-ass suite. And she's like, like, what's going on? Meanwhile, Tibor, Cherny, whatever, he's looking for her. He's like, where did she go? Like, I have no idea where she is. So he gets this big idea, right? He's like, he's going to create a pool, right? Everyone put in 5 francs. And whoever finds the girl Eve wins all the money, right? So he's getting all of the taxi drivers involved, right? He's like, she doesn't have any money. She only has this sparkly dress, right? Like, it's going to be super easy to find her. But the quicker we all look for her, right, the quicker we can find her. And Eve wakes up the next morning, and she's, like, in this big fancy bed. And, like, the phone rings, and they're like, your luggage is here. And she's like, my luggage from Monte Carlo? Like, what are you talking about? And they, like, send up these 2 guys come up, the bellboys or whatever, with like these big luggages and the big cases, and she's like, what is going on? They're like, do you want me to open it? She's like, okay. So they open it. He's like, want me to unpack it? She's like, okay. They're like unpacking. There's all these like pretty gowns and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, your chauffeur wants to know if you would like the car today. She's like, well, I wouldn't be surprised if I would need it, right? And so they like leave. And she's like, what the hell is going on? She like puts on a dress, like a nightgown or whatever. And that's when George comes up, the old guy.
Yeah.
And she's like, I should have known something was going on, right? Yeah. And she's like, so what, you want me to be your mistress or whatever? Because he tells her, you know, the woman you met last night is my wife. Yeah. And he's just like, no, listen, my wife and Jacques think they're in love. And last night, you know, Jacques was paying all this attention to you, and it was upsetting Helen, and I just need them to break up, right? Like, I'm married to her, I love her, she's my wife. Yeah. And George is like, I'll pay you very well. You get to keep all the stuff I'm giving you, and if you're really lucky, you might even get to marry Jack, right? Because he's, like, super rich, too.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, yeah, sure. And so he's like, all right, here, take this, just, you want money, 50,000 francs, like, right away. And he's like, and also, I'm inviting you to my house in Versailles for the weekend. It's going to be the same people from the bridge party, whatever. Just do your magic, get Jack off of my wife, and we're good. And Jacques, like, even sends her flowers the next morning. And he, like, sends, like, something, like, beautiful and poetic. And George is like, I'm a little upset. He just said it was nice to meet you to my wife when he sent her flowers. So she's, like, you know, in the car or whatever, and she's, like, gonna go buy a hat, and she ends up meeting the wife, Helen. And she's like, oh, thank you for inviting me to your place in Versailles for the weekend. She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, your husband invited me, I'm so excited. And Jacques is there with Helen to buy a hat. And she's like, oh, I'm looking for, like, riding boots. You know where to go. And Jacques is like, it's down the corner. She's like, can you show me? So, like, she steals Jacques away. And Helen is, like, super upset. And she's like, does anyone know who this woman is? Right? Like, she just showed up out of nowhere. She's, like, super upset about it. But anyway, they're, like, driving through, you know, like, through town in their fancy car. And a taxi driver drives up next to it because it's, like, at a stoplight. And he, like, is mimicking the chauffeur. Like, oh, look at this snooty guy. But he overhears the conversation, and they say, like, Baroness Czerny or whatever. And he's like, Czerny? He's like, hey. So he, like, rams the car. They get into a car, and he's like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. What's the name of the whatever, right? And he gets a good look at the lady. He's like, this has to be her.
Yeah.
That's the same name as the other taxi driver. Like, she's, like, you know. So he, like, goes back to the bar. And the guy, Czerny, is like, the pool is way up. It's like 8,000 francs or something. He's like, everyone get in the pool, get in the pool, get in the pool. And the taxi driver comes in, he's like, have I got news for you? I found her. He's like, what? Where? He's like, listen, get me a drink. He's like, you don't need a drink, just tell me. He's like, no, the drink is for you, because you're not going to believe me. He's like, you said she was poor, she had no money. Well, she is in fancy clothes with a fancy driver and a big fancy car, and she's staying at the Ritz. And the Czerny is like, you're right, I do need this drink. It's like, what's going on? So she goes out to Versailles for the weekend. She, like, goes driving out with Jacques, and of course Helen is like, this stupid guy, right? And she and Marcel are like, we're gonna get to the bottom of this lady because we don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but at the hat place, the haberdashery or whatever, she gets the pawn ticket for the suitcase. She ends up sending for that suitcase so she can get it to find out if that woman is actually the gatecrasher, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, she goes out to the weekend, and George is, like, very happy. He's like, you know, just a couple more days of this, you know, this weekend, and you've got it in the bag. Jacques is half in love with you already, and Helen is super pissed off. I'm pretty sure this relationship isn't gonna last, right?
Yeah.
So, right, so the suitcase comes, and she and Marcel go looking through the suitcase, and they're like, there's nothing really obvious here. And like, oh, look at this picture that she has taped inside the suitcase. if you look really, really closely at the girl in the middle, it kind of looks like her, right? Like, yeah, it's probably her. She's just like a cheap showgirl, right? Like, we'll reveal it at the party tonight because they're having like a big party. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Cherney goes to the hotel and he's like, "Where's the Baroness Cherney?" Whatever. He's like, "I can't tell you this," and he gets all the taxi drivers to like crowd the entire hotel so like no one can go in and out. And like he like is like signals to them and they all start beeping and honking and being a nuisance. So finally they tell him where she is, right?
Yeah.
So they're like having this big ball, this big party or whatever, and she's like the belle of the ball, quote unquote. Jacques is like wrapped around her finger, and Helen and Marcel are ready to like reveal like she is the whatever. So they're like, "Listen, everyone, we have big news, big news." And as they're about to announce this, who shows up but Baron Cherney, and it is the taxi driver. He like rented a suit. He like shows up in his taxi. The guy, like the doorman is trying to open the door. He comes out through the front. He's like, "Park it," or whatever. And he's like in a rented suit. And he's like, "Oh, it's the Baron." Everyone's like, "Oh, it's the Baron." And he's like, "Oh, my beautiful wife. Like, it's so good to see you." And she's like so upset. She's like, "What are you doing here?" Like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "What are you talking about, my beautiful wife?" And Helen is like, "Well, obviously those two are totally in love with each other. It has to be the Baron, right?" And Marcel's like, "Well, you don't know." She's like, No, it's true, right?" But Jacques is now like super jealous. He's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I was super like," and he knew she was married because she talked about how she was married or whatever. So he was like, "No, I'm gonna steal her from him or whatever." So that night, they're like, "Oh, this is your room, right?" Like the Cherneys or whatever, and they're like in the room together. And Tibor he like gets upset at her because she's like having this quote unquote affair with Jacques, and he's like, "Oh, you just want the money, whatever." She's like, "No, I don't need the money. If I want to be with you. We can just live poorly, whatever." He's like, "You're just saying that." So they get into this big fight and they get upset, despite the fact that they both want the same thing now.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Why is he like being so stupid?" She's like, "Well, you lost your chance. Now I'm gonna go even harder for Jacques, right?" And he's like, "Whatever. I don't even care anymore."
Oh my god.
So the next morning, they're like, "Oh, that was such a great party, everybody." They're like, "It was a great party." And they're like having breakfast, and Cherney comes down. He's like, "Oh no, our daughter is sick. She has like the measles or something." And everyone's like, "You have a daughter? You didn't even mention her." And she's like, "Oh yeah." So he's like, "Oh, we need to call her." They're like, "The measles isn't even serious anymore." They're like, "No, we need to call her. She's dying." So they're like, okay, so they call, right? And they're like, "Oh no, my poor little Franny," or whatever her name is, Francie. They're like, "Oh no, are you okay?" It's like, "Okay." And like on the other line is George. He's just like, "Oh, Mama, Papa, I love you." And she's like, "Oh, he wants to talk to you. She wants to talk to you, honey." He's like, "Who is it?" And it's like the guy. And she's making all these. And he's like, "What is going on?" And he's like, "Fine, whatever." She's like, "Oh, you know what? Your mother said she's doing so much better. We don't need to go back to Hungary or whatever. We can just stay here." And so he gets upset and he goes back to the room. And she like sees him. He like changes out of his fancy clothes and he's like just back in his taxi outfit, and he like puts on his hat and he like gives her a dirty look from the balcony. And so then she's like, "Everybody needs to tell you the truth. Actually, we don't have a daughter." And they're like, "What?" She's like, "Yes, my husband comes from an eccentric family. I didn't realize it, but he's a kind of crazy or whatever, right? Like he's always saying things, right? He's always coming up with random things. One time he thought I was a spy and he tried to kill me.
Oh my God.
He makes up things. He just has bursts and moments where he's very normal and other times where he's just insane." So he comes back down dressed as a taxi driver. He's like, "Everybody, I'm not a taxi driver and that's not my wife." And everyone's like, "Of course, He's like, "No, you don't understand." So they're all like trying to humor him and he gets super upset and they get into this big fight. And Shock is like, that's it, you're gonna divorce this man and you're gonna marry me, right? So, um, and Cherney's like, I don't know what you're gonna do because you're not even married to me. So it all ends up in divorce court.
Yeah.
Um,
we go to divorce court. Oh my
we're
god.
going to, yeah, they appear in court for a sham divorce, basically. And T-War is, like, super angry with her. And George is like, she's, like, super freaked out. She's like, he's gonna be fighting me the entire time, especially since it's fake. And he already knows that, like, I'm a gold digger, so, like, he's even angrier, you know? And George is like, don't worry, you know, when I talked to him when we were in the elevator, I offered him money to, you know, get this over with, and she was like, you don't understand, he doesn't like money, he doesn't care about money, it's not gonna work. So they're there and they're talking, and they get, like, the roughest judge, right? The judge that is, like, mean to everyone and never gives anyone any divorce, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, you all think that, like, marriage is a game and divorce is so easy. This isn't America. So they go up next, and she was talking about, like, you know, my husband, he mistreats me or whatever. He's like, everyone says their husband mistreats them, right? Like, what could possibly be wrong? And she's like, you know, in all the time that we've been together, he never once told me he loved me. I do everything for him. I try everything, you know, to be with him. I tell him I'll give up everything for him, and he doesn't even care. And every time, if I tell him he loves me, when I tell him, you know, I love him, he just says, well, good for you, or whatever, you know. And the judge is, like, super moved by this, and he's like, you know what, this is the first time I've ever had a really good reason for anyone to get a divorce. And he's like, but unfortunately, according to French law, you guys need to, like, have a quote-unquote, like, talk it out, like, 15 minutes. So, like, just go to, like, the next room. And he's like, oh, to the husband, do you have anything to say? And he's like, no, I don't have anything to say. So they go to, like, the thing, and she's in the room, and she's so mad. She's like, I can't believe you're just gonna let us get a divorce like this. He's like, isn't this what you wanted?
Oh my god.
But before they left, he asked for, like, a glass of water. Yeah. So he's in there, and he's like, oh, I love my glass of water. Outside, and he, like, starts putting shaving cream on his face. Yeah. And so he, like, goes outside, he gets the glass of water, and he comes back into the room, and everyone's like, what is he doing? And he's, like, starting to shave. And he, like, goes back out there for something. And people are like, what are you doing? And he, like, starts acting a little, like, crazy, basically. Yeah. And the judge is like, hold on a minute. This guy is crazy? He's like, and you're trying to abandon him when he's mentally unwell? Like, you tried to trick me. You're not going to get a divorce from this man. Don't even try to get a divorce from this man, right? Mm-hmm. So he's like, you guys have been denied a divorce, you can't get a divorce or whatever. And then Shock is like, it's okay, we'll go everywhere, we'll try everywhere to get you divorced. And she's like, Eve is like, you don't really love me. Like, if anything, you have such a playboy life, I would just, slow you down and hold you back. And we would be unhappy in marriage. And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. So he, like, leaves super happy. And George is like, well, Helen, he's really determined to marry, Jack is really determined to marry, Baroness Cherney or whatever. And she's like, I'm kind of over it already. So George is happy because his wife is over Jacques. And so Eve and Cherney are like, oh, right there at the end. She's like, I can't believe you did that. He's like, well, I wasn't going to get a divorce from my wife. And he's like, will you marry, basically? And she's like, yes, of course I'll marry you. So as they're leaving, they're, like, happily, like, linked in arms. And the judge is, like, walking away. He's like, oh, where are you two going? They're like, we're going to go get married. And he looks at them like, what? And that's the movie.
Wow.
That's Midnight. What do you think?
I could not have thought of any of that. I can't believe they went to divorce court.
I can't believe they went all the way to divorce court.
For a fake divorce. That's so funny. It's interesting, the whole, like, she's a gold digger, and he thinks that's like such a bad thing. They should marry for love, but also she's such a terrible gold digger.
She's not good at it.
She's really bad at it, and when she has money, she loses it immediately.
Well, I think it's like the idea of what she needs versus what she wants, right?
Exactly.
Like, she wants money, but she, you know, she just needs like someone good, someone who's good to her and like treats her well. Basically.
Yeah, because she's scared of like if she thinks her parents had an unhappy marriage because of finances, and certainly finances can make problems worse. But ultimately, it's like what you were saying. I think the things are consistent with the character. It's just interesting how negative they are towards someone who is a gold digger. I'm sitting here like, my guy, Cherney, don't you realize if you put 100% support behind this woman in her scam where she's about to like get a ton of money and she's going to marry a playboy who is probably going to be totally fine with like an open marriage just in general, that you could just collect an allowance through her shenanigans and like
but he doesn't care about money.
But she does. So it's like, why doesn't he like be like, okay, I can like have her and we're actually together, but she can still have money.
Because both men were extremely jealous of each other.
Oh, well, counseling.
Counseling. Y'all should have just been open relationship, and this would have solved all your problems.
That's what I'm saying. Then you'll have...
No, I know. That is what you're saying. It's not what I'm saying. I think she chose correctly, because Anamichi is a gorgeous.
Well, it's like, on one hand, it's like, yeah, what she needed was, you know, someone who actually loved her. But this guy also, like, only knew her for, like, 2 days, and his main reason of why she wanted to love her is because she was hot. He didn't really like any aspect of her personality. The biggest... Yeah, no, Cherney. Because he, like... The main thing from her personality that I'm getting from what you're telling me is that she wants money, and he hates that about her. He just thinks she's hot.
Mean, they had, like, a good, like, repertoire.
Chemistry.
Like, a good... chemistry.
Rapport.
Yeah.
But that can only go so far. So in a way, she's correct, because finances can ruin a marriage. It doesn't matter how good your rapport is. I'm like, she just wants some financial stability. Although, on the other hand, he seems pretty financially stable. He's just poor. So...
Yeah, like, he's not gonna aim for something higher. Like, that's his thing. And, like, at the end of the movie, she's like, we'll survive on the 40 francs a day. He's like, no, I'll make however much money you want me to make. So, it is a compromise, right? Like, she's willing to be poor. He's like, I'm willing to make money. So,
but that's what I'm saying.
We'll meet in the middle, and we'll become middle class.
If they're gonna meet in the middle, he should have just let her be like this gold-digging whatever mistress to someone, have a sugar daddy, and then both of them can live off the sugar daddy's salary. But, yeah, it's interesting, seeing kind of, because this is an older movie, seeing kind of the older attitudes, especially, they're still in, like, they're kind of right off the heels of the Depression with this one. So, it's interesting, the attitude towards someone who is concerned about money and all that. Although maybe it's more accurate to say that it's more of a classism thing. She seems to want to be part of the upper class echelon, and he's clearly more of a blue collar working class guy. So that kind of thing I can kind of buy into more. But yeah, so maybe that's the take that they're going for, rather than this woman just wants money, and because she's materialistic, she is therefore bad, or that's her flaw or something, which is a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit less of a moral that I can get behind, especially considering the lack of financial independence a lot of women had back then. But yeah. Also, I think when I look at her face and her makeup and her dressing style, I see, like, a lot of how that influences, like, drag queens. Like, I look at her and I'm like, I've seen, like, this outfit and this makeup, like, on a drag queen before, like, 100%. So I don't know if they're referencing that movie or just this era of like old Hollywood 1930s glamour.
It's gonna be the era.
Yeah.
Because that's how like they all have like that really thin eyebrows, like
Yeah.
the makeup, like hot, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, because eyebrows are thin and very high on the face,
Yeah.
and like half lidded, and the hooded dress and all that. So I was like, oh, I'm seeing a lot of like, I'm finding the source of the references and all that.
Yeah.
But it seems fun and cute and silly. So
it is. I mean, it's a screwball.
Yeah.
Comedy. But yeah, it's just really fun because these two are just trying to like get at each other, right? Like they're both trying to prove each other wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I can be rich and I can like make it, like my way of life is better, and he's like, no, I can make it and this is my way of life, and let me show you how dumb your way of life is, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, and then like the irony too, right? Like she, like all this good stuff is happening to her and she is literally like, what's the catch, right? Like, I know that this isn't for free, like what's going on. And even like when she's like with Jacques, she's like, someone's gonna find me out, right? Like she knows that it's totally fake and she's prepared for like, you know.
Yeah, she doesn't even like fully revel in.
Yeah, she doesn't really
happening.
enjoy it because she's like concerned the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's just something funny about her, who has literally zilch no money, being like, I can't live with you, you're too poor for me. It's like, bitch, I have more to my assets than you do.
No, yeah, he's literally like, I think he literally is like, you have nothing, I at least have like a house and a taxi car and
I just drove you around for free and you have the audacity. Yeah, so it's, I think if I look at it through like a class lens versus like actual material wealth lens, then it makes more sense to me commentary wise and moral wise. So it's just interesting comparing it to today, where like so much is like, get that bag, get that coin, like marry rich or whatever, right? Like everyone's like, yeah, just do it for the money kind of thing. Like, don't marry for love, just marry like some whatever guy you can tolerate if he's rich, right? Like, I'm looking for a rich man with a boat kind of jokes that are going around a lot, because it's like, working sucks. Yeah. It also reminds me of Hadestown, just because the couples, the reason why they struggled was finances, because he was a struggling artist and she was like, we don't have any food. So, but this guy has like food, so it's literally just, he's just working class. So yeah, interesting. All right, I think I would rate this movie, mentally I'm kind of thinking 4 out of 5, which is a bit of a higher rating than I would give a movie that I haven't seen.
Oh my goodness.
I know, but I think it's because so much of the story I've never heard before, just from my experience in like a movie, right? Like they go to divorce court, but it's fake divorce court.
It's real divorce court, but it's a fake divorce.
Yeah, exactly. He's like her lying about him being crazy, and she just admits the daughter's fake like 5 minutes after the phone conversation, and then like he convinces the judge to not let her divorce by showing himself as like mentally incapable of living without her or whatever.
Yeah, like using her own lie against her.
Yeah. Just there's a lot there that I'm like, oh, and then that the wife is like, oh no, she's obviously the Baron. I've never seen, apparently no one's seen the Baron Czerny before, because they just buy that's who he is.
No, because George says like, oh, I know Baron Czerny, right? So when he shows up, he's like, oh, it's the Baron. So everyone's like, well, my husband knows who the Baron is, and if he knows the Baron, he obviously knows, like, and that's obviously his wife, like, obviously that's the Baroness. Yeah. And, like, that picture is just, you know, happenstance. Like, it just so happens to look like the Baroness, but it's not her. This is just some cheap floozy, you know, like, whatever.
I also just find something so amusing about a couple where the wife is so clearly, blatantly having an affair, and the husband not only knows but interacts with the
With
man
the
she's
man?
having an affair with, and
Yeah.
like isn't trying to kill him or anything. He's just like, I know this is going on, and I need to find, like, nothing I've done. Like, she knows I know she knows I know. Like, everyone
He knows that
knows.
I know that we all know.
We
The
all
gay
know what's
best
going
friend
on.
knows. Everyone in this group knows.
It's like everyone knows. So he's like, I'm losing my wife. I need to, like, it. I find something just so funny about that,
Uh-huh.
because usually, like, nowadays affairs are kind of like more secret. Like, I don't think I've ever seen, or maybe I have. I can't think of many examples where, like, they know in such an obvious open way, because it's
Mm-hmm.
usually so secret. Like, she's just like, they're playing bridge together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he knows they're playing bridge together. They go to the same event. Um, so that there's a lot here that I'm just like, oh, this is pretty novel. It's like different,
Uh-huh.
especially for like a older film. And it's interesting, I haven't seen a lot of that continued.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I just haven't seen enough movies, but
Maybe. Um. Yeah. I don't. I don't think this movie was very popular when it came out. Even now, it's not.
yeah,
Well,
it's
maybe it
not
is.
very well known.
Um.
Like, it still feels very original, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, is my thing. It feels very like, there's a lot of it that is predictable, like the story, like the general conflict, um on all that. I was right in that the characters' needs were going to be in conflict with each other.
Oh, that's every movie.
I was still right.
Okay, so this movie was remade in 1945 with Dorothy Lamar calling Masquerade in Mexico. And in 2007, Universal Studios wanted to remake it to be shot in 2010 with Reese Witherspoon in the lead role, but it never went into production.
I don't know how that movie would go over today.
I mean, they probably have to change a bunch of stuff. I don't think it would be that. Well, I think today, like right now, I was gonna say like in 2010, I think it would have been fine. But yeah, like today, huh? Yeah, I don't know.
I think if they were going to remake it, they should still keep it set in the 30s.
Just keep it the same.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be bad. I mean, it makes more sense because, like, the trouble with today, right? Like with social media, like everyone knows everyone. Your picture is everywhere. You're all connected. Everything, right? Like if
Yeah,
you're like, oh, who's this woman? Let me look her up. Let me Google her. Let me check to see if she has whatever. Like
exactly.
it'd be much harder, to fake it.
Unless she, like, literally had zero social media presence, which would be a gag for the wife to be like, what do you, like, she's not on anything. And they're like, what do you mean she's not on anything? Like, she's not on fucking anything.
Mm-hmm.
That could be funny, like, just like a quick way to get around it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or it could be like the Barons or anything, but she is,
oh
like
yeah,
she's trying to be like an influencer or something. So she doesn't
yeah,
have a lot of followers or whatever, and it
yeah,
just seems like a super small thing.
yeah.
And then like the picture right in the suitcase, where like, oh, it's definitely her. No, it's not her. Like that doesn't look like her. It's whatever.
She just has a private Instagram account, so you can't see
Yeah, it's
her.
like locked, and they're like trying to look at the profile, but they click on it, but it's like blurry. You can't really see it. They're trying to zoom in, like, no, it's her, it's her. No, it's not her, it's not her.
Like, if she's just face tuned, like, and she's like face tuned her face or whatever, so like, is
Uh-huh.
it her? I can't tell. Okay, maybe it could work modern day then, because again,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of like stuff around gold digging now. Like, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like gold digging now is kind of more seen in a positive or rather neutral light versus
Mm-hmm.
like totally negative. Um, so that could be interesting, but I wonder what moral or direction they would go in. Because again, today I feel like the smart thing to do, it's kind of like that joke about like, oh yeah, I'm dating some girl who's on OnlyFans, and people are like, oh, how do you like knowing that guys are buying pictures of your girlfriend, and then the boyfriend's like, well, it paid for our date night last night, so like I don't care, like
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see something kind of go in that direction, but I don't know how. I feel like this movie could go that way. It just would definitely be more of like a different interpretation, I guess, of the initial conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
There's a movie I really want to see a remake for, but I know it can never be remade. It's called The Major and the Minor. I love this movie. I love this movie.
I've heard of this movie.
You're gonna be aghast when I tell you the plot of the movie. So this grown woman, and you've probably seen me watch this movie, doesn't have enough money for a full price ticket, so she disguises herself as a kid to get the kid price ticket on the train.
Uh-huh.
And everyone on the train is like, the like engineer is like, you cannot be 12 years old. You look too grown. You look too big. And she's like, no, I'm 12 years old. I'm a baby. And like, no, that's not possible. Anyway, she gets found out and she like runs away and she like ends up in the private car of this major who doesn't have really good eyesight. And he's like, oh, this poor kid got lost in my train car. Like, what are you going to do? And she's like, oh, no, I was feeling sick or whatever. Anyway, he ends up taking her because he works at like a military academy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, you're lost. You don't have enough money. The train got stuck or whatever. He's like, you'll just stay with me at the academy and we'll send you home like the next day when the trains have cleared or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, his fiance thinks she's a grown woman until he's like, no, it's a kid. She's like, oh, it's a kid or whatever. And she's like disguising herself as this kid and she's falling in love with him. And he's like, if you were an adult, if only I was like 20 years younger or whatever.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like it's kind of bad. At the end, they do end up together. Like he doesn't even know that she's this kid this entire movie. And he just like treats her like he would like a kid, but there's something like a little weird about her that he just like doesn't like. He is a little freaked out by that. It's really dumb.
It's strange he would say things like that because
he doesn't say like, but yeah, it is kind of weird.
It's like weird. Like if that actually happened in real life, we would.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like this movie could not be remade, but I think it would be hilarious to see in a modern setting. But yeah, it's very problematic in that way because it's like, ew.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, because like she's getting hit on by all these like 13-year-old boys.
Yeah.
And he like brings her up to his office. He's like, we need to have a talk. He's like, so you're like a light bulb. She's like, I'm like a light bulb. He's like, yeah, you're a light bulb, and all the moths are attracted to the light bulb, and you just have to make yourself a little bit dimmer. Like he's like, you know, like he's like being. It's really dumb. I love this movie, but it should not be remade. But I want to I want to write the remake.
I mean, they made Big, which is arguably worse because that's an actual child in an adult body versus an adult pretending to be a child. Well, there's also they made The Orphan.
I don't know what that is.
That's a horror movie where like they adopt this 13-year-old girl, but the 13-year-old girl is actually like a 30-year-old woman with like a pituitary disease or disorder, so she looks like a child.
That's scary.
Yeah, but she's like actually 30. So yeah. What would you rate this movie, Monze?
I'd rate this movie 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. Every time I watch it, I have a good time. This was the first movie I ever watched, and then immediately watched it again.
Wow.
I like watched the movie. I was like, what did I just watch? Like, I don't know what it was about this movie that I was like, oh my god. And I was like, I want to watch this again. And I just pressed play again, like on the menu, and I just rewatched it again. I just think it's really funny. Like, I think it's really, really funny. I think it's hilarious. And I just love, like, funny circumstances. I love things, you know. I love when people disguise themselves as something else. I like when people pretend to be other people. I she's going on this whole scam, and he's going on his own scam, and the two scams meet, and then they have to make a new scam together. Like, I think that's hilarious. Like, that to me is like so funny, and that's what I love about like old movies, that they always have the weirdest like premise.
Yeah.
Like, there's this other movie with also Claude Colbert. What happens in this movie? Oh, James Stewart is in it, and I forgot the name of the movie, and he is like looking for this guy who killed, because he's a private detective, like his customer's wife or whatever, because they think he did. He's like, I'm gonna find out who killed her. So he like goes on this thing, and he runs into her, and then he has disguised himself as someone else because they think that maybe he's involved with the murder. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'm just, and it's like, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? Like, this doesn't need to be this complicated. Like, why? And he like disguises himself as like a Boy Scout troop leader, and he's wearing like these stupid big glasses and this big clothes because he like stole them from somebody. Like, it's so like unnecessary. And then he goes undercover as well, like as an actor in this like local play. Like, why did we get here? Like, why are we here?
You know what it is? These movies run like a D&D campaign.
Yeah.
Where no one has a brain cell, and they're just like, you know what would be a good idea? If I also came in dressed as the parent, or if I dressed up as this, or if I whatever, or like you receive a large sum of money, what do? I blow it all in Monte Carlo. Like, that's how it feels. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, a lot of these movies are just like fun, right? Like, they're just like, we're gonna have a good time, and that's what we're gonna give you.
I just also really like that George has come up with this brilliant win-win situation.
Yeah.
Where he's like,
you get this rich man and I'll get my wife.
Exactly. I'm like, wow.
I will literally give you as much money as you want. I literally don't care. I just want my wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, money is nothing to me. And then he's even like, I'll pay you until you get the man, and then you will also marry like a rich guy and have a bunch of money. Like, there's literally no lose scenario.
No lose situation. There's no way you can lose. And she lost. I mean, monetarily she lost.
Well, even then she still won in the end, because he still like got his wife back, and then she found true love.
Yeah.
And she's gonna get a little more money, but yeah, everyone's happy in the end.
Yes. As it should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Alright, so Monze, where can they find us?
Oh my god, where can they find us? You guys can find us on Twitter. Sometimes I try to be real good about being active on there, but I'm not sometimes. We at Don't Watch Movies on Twitter. Right? You can find me on Twitter at Magic Monster. I forgot the name of my. What about you, Corinne? I'm a mess today. How's it going?
It's going great. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Corinne is Korean. I almost said .com, but I do have a website.
Korean.com.
And yeah, thanks for listening. Let us know what 1930s movie you like, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.